What's up, adventurers, and welcome to our very first Zelda theory. Ever since the teaser trailer for Breath of the Wild 2, many people have speculated the origins of the resting place of what many believe to be the remains of Ganondorf. Well, it is our turn to throw our hat in the ring as we make an argument of where we believe this resting place lies, as well as it having ties to the canonical original antagonist in the Zelda lore, Demise.
The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild can be interpreted as an homage to the entirety of the series. This has even sparked debates online regarding which timeline the series is in, since it references all three timelines. But one of the games that is referenced the most is Skyward Sword, and we believe that this is no accident. Skyward Sword was the previous main entry in the series, and it tells the origin of Link and Zelda, and their eternal conflict against evil. Skyward Sword's presence is seen throughout Breath of the Wild. The most prominent example is the goddess statues, which you must exchange spirit orbs for a piece of heart or stamina vessel. Another example is Zelda traveling to the springs that are near identical to the Earth Spring and the Skyview Spring in Skyward Sword. However, we believe one of the most revealing details is the inclusion of Fi, calling out to Link after completing the Trials of the Sword.
So in the base game, we see references to the deity from Skyward Sword, and two holy locations that were essential for Zelda becoming the goddess reincarnate. But the Zelda team added Fi in the DLC, which lends to the idea that Skyward Sword may have been a more prominent focus in the bonus content. From all of these Skyward Sword references, the biggest omission from the game is its antagonist, Demise. How could the game, which goes so far to celebrate the entire series, fail to recognize or pay homage to the original baddie according to Zelda lore? Maybe the next batch of DLC ideas was to include Demise, but the story and adventure that went along with it turned into a much larger expansion, requiring it to be its own title.
Eiji Aonuma stated that in an interview with Kotaku, when it comes down to technical things, DLC is pretty much data. You're adding data to a pre-existing title. And so when we wanted to add bigger changes, DLC is not enough. And that's why we thought maybe a sequel would be a better fit. We saw how the first batch of DLC had the reveal of including Fi. What if the large expansion, the idea that started off as DLC, became too large, forcing it to become a sequel, and was the Zelda team's celebration of the two primary antagonists of Zelda, Ganondorf and Demise? Now from the trailer, many can speculate the mummified body is the remains of Ganondorf. But what would be the tribute to Demise? We believe the resting place of Ganondorf is in fact the tomb of Demise.
When we first saw this tomb, one thing we noticed was, gee, the layout looks oddly similar to a different location in Breath of the Wild. And we realized that this tomb has a similar structure to the Shrine of Resurrection. There's a pyramid-like structure above someone, with a magical aura falling down upon the body. Now, if we were to interpret magic acting similar as electricity, it is not too far to think that you can reverse the direction of the magic to perform the opposite task. In this case, if the Shrine of Resurrection was to revive a person from near death, could the magic in this tomb impede a man, strong in will and power, to return to the land of Hyrule to seek destruction? We witnessed in Twilight Princess how Ganondorf could overcome exile to the Twilight Realm and still wreak havoc upon Hyrule. Perhaps this time around, the people of Hyrule took extra steps of precaution to not only imprison his body, but hinder his strength as well. If this were the case, then a location that appeared similar to the Shrine of Resurrection, but the magic performing the opposite task, would be the mechanism to hamper Ganondorf's return.
But what would you call this room? If we were to base this squarely as the antonym of the Shrine of Resurrection, then an obvious title would be the Tomb of Demise. And if we are to believe this is the name of the tomb, then we can infer that this room and the location of Demise's destruction is one and the same. Now, this could be us reaching for a simple play on words, but the inclusion of Phi after completing the Trials of the Sword leads us to believe that the development team was pushing for an additional story, threads, to Skyward Sword. So it cannot be too hard to think that maybe they wanted to continue this trend by including Demise as well. So if this is in fact Demise's final resting place, could this give an idea as to where the tomb actually lies?
The conclusion of Skyward Sword ended with the goddess statue from Skyloft falling from the heavens when Link wished for the destruction of Demise. Now where do we see a giant goddess statue in Breath of the Wild? Not within Hyrule Castle, but inside the Forgotten Temple. There are several theories out there where people point out the similarities between the Forgotten Temple and the Sealed Temple in Skyward Sword. One such video is from Zeltik, who points out these amazing details that shows the similarities between the Forgotten Temple in Breath of the Wild and the Sealed Temple in Skyward Sword. Such details include the depictions of Loftwings, which only seen in Breath of the Wild within the Forgotten Temple, and the pillar formation that are identical to both temples. And we think that this theory can be extended even further. Taking these two details into account, the giant goddess statue and the many similarities between the Forgotten Temple and the Sealed Temple, then we think that the Tomb of Demise lies directly beneath the goddess statue in Breath of the Wild. If you want to see a deeper dive into the similarities between the Breath of the Wild's Forgotten Temple and Skyward Sword's Sealed Temple, then we definitely recommend checking out Zeltik's video, The Mystery of Breath of the Wild, The Forgotten Temple. Link will be in the description below.
The tomb imprisoned in Ganondorf, lying beneath the Forgotten Temple, would make a perfect location for it. In the game, there is very little residing within its walls, besides the hordes of broken down guardians and a shrine. But there is also little information to the temple's origins. This lack of knowledge would have compelled Breath of the Wild Zelda to investigate this location as thoroughly as possible. Throughout Link's memories, and from what we read in her journals, she was infatuated with discovering the uses of the ancient Sheikah technology and pushed herself to uncover all of the hidden mysteries of their shrines, guardians, and divine beasts. By the end of the Breath of the Wild, Zelda knows everything there is to know about the Sheikah technology, and her new goal is to restore Hyrule to its former glory, if not beyond. If she is to achieve this goal, she must investigate one of the most mysterious locations in Hyrule, the Forgotten Temple. Since there is really little to know about it, and the untapped knowledge such as the engineering and architectural feats of achievement to create such a large temple would be useful to build up Hyrule even more. And on top of this, the Forgotten Temple has the most untapped potential in regards to game development, since all that it possesses is a shrine, a giant goddess statue, and eventually the location for Link to receive his tunic after the goddesses deem him worthy. This cannot be all there is to this amazing landmark. There has to be more to its story, and our belief is that the story originates with the destruction of Demise and the current resting place for the imprisoned Ganondorf.
In conclusion, the sequel to Breath of the Wild conceptually originating as a DLC story that seemed far more intriguing to be a simple add-on at the end of the Breath of the Wild, leads us to believe that Eiji Aonuma and his team wanted to include Skyward Sword more within Breath of the Wild. We can assume this with the small detail of showing Fi calling out to Link within the Master Sword. And of all the references for Skyward Sword within Breath of the Wild, a reference to Demise is absent from it all. If Ganondorf's body is, in fact, in the final resting place of Demise, then it would be under a large goddess statue in close proximity to a temple that resembles the Sealed Temple from Skyward Sword. The Forgotten Temple holds both of these details. And lastly, the Forgotten Temple has the most untapped potential since it is the least defined or explored location in Hyrule, which would make for a great opportunity to have Zelda pique her curiosity to explore the depths of its halls more thoroughly.
Well, that about wraps it up for our very first Zelda theory. Sean has been working on this one for a long time, and we've been excited to share it with you. Let us know what you think about the theory and whether this will be revealed in Breath of the Wild 2. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, especially if you liked our Tomb of Demise theory. And we will see you on the next adventure. Bye.